How are you guys doing today? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Maye Today, Wednesday, October 9th, just a day away from the start of Week 6. It feels like these weeks are now coming at you very, very fast. And on today's show, we're going to talk about some of the games and some of the more breaking news, obviously, with the biggest one being Drake Maye being named the starter. We're going to talk about that. Also, the Davante Adams update after the situations have sort of changed with the Jets and the Saints. We'll talk about whether Davante Adams should even want to go there. We're going to recap the Giants game and also preview a little bit the Ravens and the Commanders game as well in this episode. So make sure to stay tuned for all of that. And before we get started, I'd like to remind you guys, if you guys want to be part of the show, if you guys have any questions, comments, or opinions you'd like to share on anything we say on here, don't hesitate to go and do so, and we want to hear about it as well. You guys are a big part of what makes this show great, and we thrive on your energy and insights. So if you want to make it absolutely sure that your message stands out and gets featured on the show, there's an easy way to go about that just by using the new Super Chat feature. Just click the $sign at the bottom of the chat box to send in your Super Chat, and this way it guarantees that your message gets on the air, and it's also a great way to support our channel. We rely on your support to keep bringing you the sports content you love, and we always appreciate when you guys help us out in that way. And again, when you guys contribute to the show and comment and leave any sort of things in the chat box to make the show more interactive, more conversational. I always love when you guys do that, so go ahead and let us know what you're thinking. Hit the Super Chat button again, and let's keep the show as interactive and as exciting as possible. We always appreciate you guys doing that for us and being more involved with the show as we move on. But with that being said, now we can jump into the biggest news of the day. It was crazy. It was a crazy day yesterday for the AFC East, I should say. Insane day yesterday because of the news, obviously, of Robert Saleh being fired, but also the NFL Network reported in the afternoon that the Patriots will be starting their rookie quarterback Drake Maye in their Week 6 matchup against the Houston Texans. The report was later confirmed by Jory Epstein of Yahoo Sports, and I feel like this was obviously a big story, like all the rookie quarterbacks were into the draft and then afterwards, and how they all developed and all that sort of thing. We obviously knew Caleb was going to play. We knew probably that Jayden Daniels was going to play. Bo Nix quickly became the outright favorite in that competition throughout training camp. And the other situations, obviously J.J. McCarthy gets hurt, and Michael Penix, with Kirk Cousins being there, we kind of had an idea that that probably wasn't going to be a quick start for Michael Penix. But Drake Maye was in an interesting situation where, they had Jacoby Brissett there, and you knew what the situation was, right? We knew the scenario that eventually this was going to be Drake Maye's, right? But for however long it was going to take, Jacoby was going to be in there. And now it has still hit with a sudden urgency, I feel like, that I'm definitely not ready to accept the fact that Drake Maye is going to start already. And with that being the case now, he is one of the 6 rookies that was taken in the first round, and with him now being named the starter, he'll join Caleb, Jayden, Bo as the only other rookie quarterbacks to be starting for their teams already. And that's probably going to be it, right? Because JJ's hurt, and I don't think Michael Penix is going to play this year. And Drake Maye now takes over the job very suddenly, like I said, from Jacoby Brissett, who was brought in here, just this year because he is familiar with the New England Patriots. He's a veteran now. He's a solid guy, solid backup, to bring in, reliable quarterback. Not really going to lose you the game too often with boneheaded decisions or bad interceptions or anything like that, but he's also not going to do anything special. So you kind of know what you're getting with him. Also, his familiarity with Alex Van Pelt, the Patriots offensive coordinator, his offensive scheme, his game plan, they were together in Cleveland, so bringing Jacoby over here with him makes total sense, right, to get this thing going as quickly as possible. But now, that was the game plan originally, right? But now, after a 1-4 start, internally, they must have felt that they can't be this bad, right? Because we saw the upset win in Week 1, and I think that took everyone by surprise, including the Patriots. So when you get a win like that, I'm sort of speculating here that you get a win like that and you're thinking like, wow, like this defense is actually very good, very above average, can make stops repeatedly against some of the good teams, right? When you need it. The running game looks very solid as well. If we could do that, not, get ourselves into trouble too much, that's a great weapon to have. Not a lot of teams say that they're confident enough to run it as well as the Patriots do. At least in that game they did, right? So that's another thing that they had going for them. And they won the game against the Bengals team that a lot of people had penciled in as Super Bowl contenders, right? So you start off the year 1-0, but quickly after that, it all kind of fell apart pretty quickly, and they got hit with a hard piece of reality, because after week 1, it all kind of started to come to light with the real issues that this team had and why, a lot of people had their doubts around this roster, because you look at the offensive line deficiencies became more obvious as they played, the 49ers, as they played the Jets and these teams like that. Those problems became more evident. Also, the running game in some of these latest games has not been there. Ramondre Stevenson has had trouble fumbling the ball, so that's kind of stopped everything where it was. Then they played better offenses as well throughout the course of the last 3 to 4 weeks. So their defense, while it is good, it's not going to be able to hold opposing teams to 15, 17, 13 points each and every game. The defense, got their business handed to them a lot of times. So with that, you might rely more on your offense, but the offense really wasn't there because of the lack of skill players that the Patriots have. And again, Jacoby really isn't the guy that's coming in there and gonna make wow throws, right? He's gonna follow the script, follow the plan, and if it's not there, he's probably gonna throw it away or something. Just try not to lose the game, right? That's also what became evident over the last few games, and the last 4 games, they've lost their last 4 games in a row. They failed to score 13 points in their last 3 consecutive weeks. They lost to Miami this past Sunday, which I felt like was the last straw, because the Dolphins over the last 2 to 3 weeks looked very, very bad without Tua. They had Skylar Thompson in there. They only put up 3 points against the Seahawks. It was even arguably worse against the Tennessee Titans at home. And then for you to face them now, again, with Tyler Huntley in as quarterback, you would think that, this is an opportunity to get a win here with this team, also in the Miami Dolphins, that doesn't really know what's going to happen with their offense. So the fact that you lost the game, only put up 10 points as well, I felt like was the last straw for this Patriots team. And now also you're looking at this, just where they rank so far through the first 5 weeks. They rank 31st in total offense so far, and they're last in the NFL in passing yards per game. So all these reasons why you can understand the change, you can understand why the Patriots are thinking, all right, let's create a spark here. Let's try and get something going. Let's bring the young guy in, right? But also, you could take it in the same way, take all these reasons why the Patriots probably aren't that good, and make a good argument that Drake Maye starting should be the last thing on everyone's mind because of all these bad reasons I just gave out for the Patriots, right? But I am worried, though, just to say the least, because of this decision, and because yes, you're 1-4, and all the facts and performances look really bad and things like that. You feel desperate to try and get something going, and I think it's interesting how people respond to a team being 1-4 in this context with a rookie quarterback, right? Because to me, you can take it one of two ways. The first one, like I sort of alluded to, you're 1-4 and you have this sense of urgency, right? Like, hey guys, we got to get this together. We need to create a spark. Let's try and switch things up. Let's bring in the young quarterback, right? We need to turn this around and get back to winning, I guess, right? That's one way, right? The pro-productive, the urgent kind of mindset that you need when you're 1-4. But also, to me, how I would take it, I feel like it's more realistic, is the fact that you're 1-4 and you're thinking, well, we weren't going to be all that good anyway this year. Why is everyone freaking out about the fact that the Patriots are 1-4 when at the beginning of the season, and probably still now, they aren't favored to win any of their games? So really, this is exactly what should have happened. And now people are starting to freak out like they need to change the quarterback or something to kind of get back into contention, which to me makes no sense because of the fact that everyone had him losing pretty much every game. So this is exactly how it turns out, but now we're feeling urgent about changing something, right? And also, the timing of this, I don't really like it. If you were going to change to Drake Maye, why not do it against the team that's also struggling on offense last week? Not do it against the 4-1, one of the favorites to win AFC Houston Texans, where you're definitely going to get outscored. The quarterback comparison is obviously night and day. Their defensive line alone is probably going to have a day against that offensive line, and the last thing you need is Drake Maye to get pummeled in his first game. So start him against the Dolphins, or start him next week when you guys go to London or something like that. To start him against the Texans, I think definitely could have been avoided. It's a little crazy to me. And also, they don't have their center, David Andrews, anymore. He's out for the remainder of the year. And the offensive line is a major concern, obviously, and no skill players really on the outsides, other than, I guess, Kendrick Bourne coming back and Demario Douglas looking pretty decent. But still, it's far and away from what an ideal quarterback situation should be. Just obviously look at Jayden Daniels and Caleb now starting to pick it up. It's not really just on Drake Maye, but the idea that, the Patriots, I don't feel like there was such a need to do it right now. They could have waited a couple more weeks. Maybe you were 1-8, 1-7 or something like that later on. Then you bring in Drake Maye, right? There's no real expectations anymore, even less than there already was. So then you bring him in there. Don't have to face the Texans the first week, and then you go from there and see how it goes after that. But to bring him in right now, I feel like this first start could be, you could lose more in this first start than you could really gain for Drake Maye. But, the decision's already made, and with that being said, to close this segment out, I feel like it could end badly on Sunday with him just not playing very well. But for that, I'll just say that people, with this decision already being made, we got to tame or temper our expectations a little bit now with Drake Maye. Yes, it's exciting that your rookie's going to play, but nobody should be expecting anything special, right, from Drake Maye against the Texans in his first start. If it looks really bad, I don't think he should be receiving criticism or anything like that. If you want to criticize someone, criticize the Patriots for starting him in this game, but it should not fall on Drake Maye. And I thought I needed to say that in case people just watch that game and think, like, this guy stinks. Why did we pick him number 3? The circumstances and the context behind it definitely matters. So watch the expectations and limit it when Drake Maye takes on the Houston Texans this week. So that was definitely the biggest news. I wasn't expecting to hear that yesterday, but of course we had to talk about it. And now moving on, going from one rookie quarterback to another in Week 6 as well. We're going to talk about Jayden Daniels now taking over the NFL after another win over the Cleveland Browns, but we're going to preview his next game against a much tougher Baltimore Ravens team in Baltimore. And it's going to be a great game, probably the best game of Week 6. So we're going to preview it here, give our thoughts, our predictions, and look a little bit deeper into the makeup of these two teams. So stick around. We'll be right back with a lot more right after this break.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, some losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip, you choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
We are back now on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to talk about previewing one of the upcoming games in Week 6. But before I do that, on that note, I just saw a report talking about Colts wide receiver Michael Pittman. According to reports, he is dealing with a back injury that could sideline him for multiple weeks. So, the report also said that being placed on the injured reserve is another consideration for the Colts. So, that's a big blow. Breaking news there from ESPN on Michael Pittman, the number one receiver for the Indianapolis Colts. So, that's pretty big for them, obviously, because Michael Pittman, I felt like against the Steelers, we're starting to kind of turn it up a little bit. He played very well in that game, but now it looks like he is going to be sidelined indefinitely, at least, from that report. So that's the Colts side of things. But now looking at this preview here, the Commanders taking on the Baltimore Ravens. To me, this is the most must-watch game of this week in Week 6. It takes place in Baltimore, where Jayden Daniels and the 4-1 Commanders take on Lamar Jackson and the 3-2 Baltimore Ravens. For right now, Jayden Daniels seems to be like the greatest thing going in football, right? Everyone can't say enough about Jayden Daniels and the performances he's being put on, the records he's breaking and things like that. He can do no wrong right now in the eyes of a lot of people in the NFL. But this is undoubtedly Jayden Daniels' greatest challenge so far, right? And Baltimore faces another fellow top 4 scoring team in the NFL, right? These two teams have definitely, if you can say anything about these two teams, is that their offense is definitely not lacking. You look at the Washington Commanders putting up 30-plus in their last game against the Cardinals, another 30-plus, against the Cincinnati Bengals, another 30-plus. They've been finding it easy to score against these teams, and the Baltimore Ravens, no different, right? They handled the Buffalo Bills. They just barely won against the Cincinnati Bengals and things like that. They're also not finding it too hard to get in the end zone either. So, two top 4 scoring teams should bring a lot of excitement in this game. And the Ravens, like I mentioned, are playing another top 4 scoring team because they just played the Cincinnati Bengals as well. The Bengals are 4th in scoring in the NFL right now at 28 points per game. Washington is actually number 1. They've scored the most points per game in the NFL thus far with a rookie quarterback. So that is very impressive. And Baltimore is actually in 2nd, averaging 29 points per game. So if we could take anything from the Bengals and Ravens game and how exciting that was, that's what I'm hoping to see in this Week 6 matchup between the Ravens and the Commanders. And the biggest thing, obviously, that stands out are the two quarterbacks, right? Lamar and how he's taken the NFL by storm with his multi-dimensional skill set that he brings on the ground. He's become a lot better of a passer throughout his career. But Jayden Daniels, looking pretty much in the mirror, looking at Lamar Jackson, right? Almost the exact same thing you get from Lamar Jackson you get with Jayden Daniels now, but I think what's the difference is that Jayden Daniels has come in a lot more refined. Obviously, he spent a lot more time in college than the typical rookie quarterback does, and I think it's paid off. Certainly, he looks a lot more in control. His demeanor is very, very calm, very modest and everything like that, but he always feels like he knows and is in control, like I said. And I'm pretty sure he still leads the NFL in completion percentage as well as a rookie. So it's very nerve-wracking a little bit looking at how just Jayden Daniels has come in and very swiftly has gotten the handle, it looks like, of the NFL so far. And this matchup is going to be interesting for a lot more reasons just outside of the quarterbacks that definitely bring a lot. But you're looking at also the top 2 rushing teams in the NFL right now. 2 top 5 teams in total yards as well are what these two squads bring to the table. But the differences come on the defensive side of the ball because it's not so dominant on that side, let's say, right? Washington is around middle of the pack with a 23 points allowed per game. Like I said, middle of the pack, whereas the Baltimore Ravens are 26th in the NFL, allowing 25.2 points per game. So for every point they score, it seems like they give up just as many points as well. So it could kind of point to the fact that the Ravens almost need to score that many points because their defense can't really hold other than that game against the Buffalo Bills. Also, looking at these two defenses as well, Baltimore, while their passing defense, maybe their overall defense might not be great, maybe top 10 right now, the Baltimore Ravens have the best run defense so far, averaging or allowing other teams to average 60 rushing yards per game, while the Washington Commanders are on the other side of the spectrum now because they've allowed 130 yards per game to the run. Very different there. The Commanders going up against this Ravens team who, like I said, is one of the top 2 rushing teams in the NFL. Not a great sign there. So that's another thing. Also, now focusing on specifically the passing game, Washington is 13th in passing yards allowed, allowing 198 passing yards allowed, and the Baltimore Ravens are allowing the second most passing yards per game at 280 passing yards per game. And like I said before, Jayden Daniels, if not first, probably top 3 most accurate quarterbacks right now based on the completion percentage. So it doesn't really match up well in that case. But you could also make the point that the Commanders, while they have Terry McLaurin, are they going to rely on those other guys to step up, right? Daimi Brown, Luke McCaffrey, Zacchaeus, Zach Ertz. Are these guys really going to be up to the challenge and make big plays when their number is called? You know, Terry can do his thing, right? But I feel like the Ravens should and will take him away in this game. So how does that affect it? Can the Ravens defense sort of step up in that regard? Or will the Commanders' other stars try to step up? And how successful will they be in that aspect? So I thought that was pretty interesting looking at both of these teams. And also focusing on the Commanders a little bit more. There's no real severe injuries coming into this game so far, just where we are in the week. They've won their last 4 games in a row since losing to Tampa Bay. And, Jayden Daniels' stellar performances are really what take the headlines, what make the headlines so far in the NFL. But their defense hasn't been too bad either. And I know it's a collaborative effort, right? With the offense playing so well, getting out to leads, that defense, I always stress it on here, plays a lot better because they know they could take a bit more risks. They could send more people because they're playing with a lead now. They don't have to preserve anything. And the Commanders' offense has done a great job of allowing them to do that. A big shout out to Cliff Kingsbury, right? He might not have been great as a head coach, but as a play caller, as a offensive coordinator, he's really just stepped right in flow with Jayden Daniels and has taken this offense to a lot of the top of the stack categories as well. So he's had a big part to do in all of this. And, it sounds crazy when people are talking about Jayden Daniels, back on him, as being one of the favorites for MVPs and things like that, or talking about the Commanders winning the division. That was insane a couple weeks ago, but now it's looking a bit more likely now. I think more people are jumping on that bandwagon for the Commanders at least to win that division. MVP or anything like that, I think it is a little crazy still for Jayden Daniels as a rookie, but if they remain at 1 loss, that's a pretty interesting question, right? How many wins do they have to put up in a row now for people to actually take this seriously? Let's say if they're like 7-1, 8-1, is he truly a candidate to win MVP? I think that could be the absolute ceiling that we see from Jayden Daniels, but we don't know up until now. This is definitely going to be their biggest test so far. And then on the other side, looking at the Baltimore Ravens, again, no real injuries for them either. Marlon Humphrey could be dealing with something, a lower leg injury, because he was seen walking in a boot after the Bengals game. So that's Ravens. They've won their last 3 games in a row as well. They're on a little bit of a streak like the Commanders are. And their offense is hitting on all cylinders right now. Their last home game, they dominated against another high-powered offense as well. So are they going to put up an encore to that performance and, again, run all over the Commanders like they did the Bills? And is their defense going to look like a top 5 defense like it did against the Bills? Those are all questions. And some of the matchups I'm looking at as well that kind of go off of that revolve around that, because we're looking at one of them being the Baltimore Ravens offensive line combined with Derrick Henry against this Washington Commanders defensive line, combined also with Bobby Wagner. Probably the leader of that defense, if you had to pick someone, calling out all the plays, quarterbacking that defense, if you will. and how does he stop Derrick Henry, right? How does he line everything up? Which line, offensive line, defensive line matchup is going to win the day on Sunday? And that's going to be a big predecessor on how, or a predictor on how everything is gonna play out on Sunday, because the Ravens offensive line has been blocking very good in the running game, and Washington's defensive line, I feel like people thought it'd be worse, but they're actually playing a little bit better. So that's a matchup I'm interested in looking at. Then also Cliff Kingsbury, I mentioned him before and how good of a job he's doing. He's going up against a new defensive coordinator in Zach Orr, very limited to no experience as a coordinator. So who's going to win that chess match, right? How is Cliff Kingsbury going to game plan around maybe taking advantage of some of the deficiencies for the Ravens defense? Or maybe can Zach Orr impress again like he did against the Bills and stop this very high-powered offense for the Washington Commanders? That's something that fascinates me looking at that also. And the Baltimore Ravens secondary going up against a very light receiving group for the Washington Commanders, because outside of Terry McLaurin, like I said before, it's not too eye-popping, right? The other names that stick out. So are they going to be able to completely dominate them, or is Jayden Daniels really just going to be on the money throwing seeds out there to these guys to make them look better? That's going to be something to definitely watch. And now finally my prediction. If I were to give a prediction in this game, you know what I've noticed about these predictions that I've given out? Usually it goes to the home teams or the one that should win, right, in a lot of people's minds. But I think I'm going to go with the Commanders now to shock everyone by going into Baltimore and beating, almost like their carbon copy of themselves, but just a younger version with Jayden Daniels, right? Because I think the Ravens have had the obvious luxury of never having to play Lamar Jackson, right, because he's obviously on their team. But now they get their own taste of what everyone has had to deal with for the last, I don't know however long Lamar's been in the league, but you get the point, right? They've never had to play someone like that, other than maybe Kyler once in a blue moon or something like that. So now they're going to get a taste of it yet again. It's very different than playing, obviously, Joe Burrow, for as good as he is. You get a taste of it with Josh Allen a little bit, but I don't think he's as nimble and as just quick in a short area like Lamar, like Jayden Daniels are. So I think that could bring a couple problems for this team. Also, protecting against the pass, or protecting against the most accurate quarterback in the league, and he's got top speed on top of that. It's something that requires a lot of discipline, and I feel like sometimes this Ravens secondary and Ravens defense just overall gets a little bit loose, isn't too strict on their X's and O's, right, if that makes sense. So I feel like that could be something that not a lot of people are talking about, and this defense has been shaky against the pass overall. So this run game with Washington is also going to be very important, and if they could get a little bit of something going there and get Jayden Daniels going in the run game as well, it's going to make those matchups easier on the outside. And I'm going to go with a surprise here. I'm going to go with the Commanders going to 5-1 and the Ravens dropping to 3-3. And we're fully buying into the Jayden Daniels sweepstakes now. If they get this win, if you thought people talked about Jayden Daniels before, if he gets this win, just wait until what everyone's saying about him the following day. So we'll be looking forward to that. Hopefully they get that done. As a Steelers fan, trying to hide my bias. But that is the preview to that game. We're going to get into more previews tomorrow on tomorrow's show. But for right now, we're going to get into another break, and we're going to bring up a topic that I thought was interesting, how the NFL looks a lot more even this year. I don't know what it is. I'm going to try and give you guys an answer on what I think it is, but there's been a lot more competitive games. Anybody seems that they could beat anybody so far through 5 weeks in the NFL. We're going to talk about that, why that is, and I'll give my explanation for why I think we've seen a lot more of an even playing field in the NFL so far. So stick around for that. We'll be right back in just a few seconds.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Back in here on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, now to bring up a topic that I've been thinking about mostly for the last couple days now, and looking at it more now, and how I want to bring it up on today's show, because I feel like it can't only be me. That I think it's fair to say that now through the first 5 weeks of the season, I feel like I still don't know truly who would I crown as the outright top NFL team so far through the first 5 weeks. You know, there are certainly some of the more favored answers out there. Of course, you have the Minnesota Vikings, still undefeated, but when push comes to shove, I don't think the majority of people would put their money on Sam Darnold going out there and winning a big game. That's always a big critique of theirs, even though they're undefeated and they're 5-0 and their defense is playing great. There's still that main concern with Sam Darnold, so still people could pick apart that. And the Vikings have been in some close games where they could have definitely had closer outcomes, or where they could have maybe let a game get away from them if it wasn't for how their defense is playing, and how long is that going to last, right? Are they going to be this dominant force each and every game? That's probably unlikely. They're going to get a bad performance from their defense probably one of these weeks, and it could cost them. So the biggest thing about them is Sam Darnold, right? It's not an outright team yet that I feel like a lot of people are crowning as the best team. Then you look at the Kansas City Chiefs, right? Undefeated as well, but another situation where I think a lot of people are pretty split on how they evaluate the Chiefs, right? You know, they're the Chiefs. They're the two-time defending Super Bowl champions. They have the best player in the NFL. They have arguably the best coach in the NFL as well, but they're dealing with a lot of injuries. And up until this point, you know, Pat and that offense haven't looked great. They weren't great in the red zone this past week as well. So there are certainly some things there that you can point to and think about how it's not an outright dominant performance as of yet for them as well. And then even after that, the next best option that I've seen a lot of people go to is the Baltimore Ravens, right? They have the deadliest duo in the NFL with Lamar and Derek. They dismantled the Buffalo Bills. They just won a thriller over the Cincinnati Bengals. And you could even point to the Chiefs game where they could have won that one if Isaiah Likely's foot was just like 2 inches closer to his body. They probably could have won that game. But, you know, even still with them, you know, while their offense is great, I just mentioned and talked about how their defense, their passing defense, is one of the worst in the NFL as of right now. They're sort of getting known for blowing these big quarter leads, or the fourth quarter leads, I should say. They beat the Cowboys, but in that game, they allowed them to come back. The Cowboys scored like 3 touchdowns in a row or something. And, you know, if the Cowboys could have scored 1 touchdown or something like that in the first half, and that made it so one-sided early on, who knows? Maybe they come back in that game and they get something going from that. That could have been another outcome that could have played against them as well. So that's a big thing, obviously, in the playoffs, where that's where the ultimate goal is, right? To get to the playoffs, make a deep run, right? You can't have or be known as the team that gives up these leads, because that's the last thing you have to do and can afford to do in the playoffs. So they look great right now, but they've also dropped some of those games against the Ravens, the Chiefs obviously being their 2 losses. So, you know, they're also there with some critiques you can make on them. I think people still would pick apart that the Ravens are the outright most dominant team. They're not looking like they did last year, right? And I think that's the main example. Because of that defense, they lost a lot of pieces. They lost, you know, Stone, who was a a turnover machine for them. They lost Patrick Queen now. I think John Simpson is their other linebacker's name. He's not awful, but, when they had Patrick Queen, right, it looked like no one was going to run more than 3 yards on them or 2 yards from them with Patrick and Roquan Smith there in the middle. Also, Jadeveon Clowney left. That's some more defensive line depth as well there. And now you're starting a pretty young rookie in Nate Wiggins as well. So there's a lot of new faces trying to get everything accustomed to what it is now. And I think looking back to last year, you could definitely say that the defensive aspect of this team, while they look so much better on offense now with Derrick Henry, is something that worries you. It's not as dominant as it was last year. So that's where I kind of stand on the Ravens. And then after that, you have some other teams that I wanted to mention on here as well. You look at the Detroit Lions maybe as another favorite to be considered maybe the outright best team, considering their last performance against the Seahawks where Jameson Williams got in the end zone, Amon-Ra St. Brown got in the end zone, David Montgomery got in the end zone, Jared Goff threw a perfect game, and they put up like over 40-something points. But also with the Lions, their defense still hasn't looked dominant, much like the Ravens as well. They've allowed 20-plus points in every game except against the Arizona Cardinals. Aiden Hutchinson leads them in sacks, and I don't know how much the second guy has, but it can't be any more than 3 sacks on the year so far. It feels like they struggle with getting pressure on the quarterback outside of just Aiden Hutchinson. So, again, when the playoffs come around, you can't just have one main guy doing it. You need a lot more guys to contribute, so that always has been my biggest concern with them. And their secondary is improved, I will say that, but even still, Carlton Davis sometimes can get flagged for being a bit too aggressive, or Terrion Arnold really struggled in their last game against the Seahawks. So, much like the Ravens, while their offense looks great, they have the best offensive line in all of football, you still could pick them apart on the defensive side of the ball. Then also, Buffalo was a big pick for being the best team in the NFL through their first 3 games, but obviously in the last 2, they lost their last 2 games in a row, and it's looking more and more like they certainly miss a guy like Stephon Diggs. And, other teams outside of Buffalo, you look at the Commanders, they're pretty hot right now. They're taking the league by storm, like we just mentioned, but are people really going to consider them as the best team in the NFL right now? Also, Houston looks great, but they played a close game against the Colts, and they got dismantled by the Minnesota Vikings on here. So if you're not going to crown the Vikings as the best team in the NFL, you shouldn't crown the Houston Texans as the best team, because even though the record's impressive, the Vikings destroyed them, right? So that's another thing that it kind of holds you back by really picking the Texans as the outright team to beat right now in the NFL. And with all the praise going around, obviously from me for all these teams, I think one of my biggest points is that I could really name only 3 teams that I would consider not being able to be competitive in a lot of games, and that's the Carolina Panthers, the Patriots, and the Cleveland Browns. I think those teams have shown consistently over multiple games that they're able or they're not able to be competitive, and that they get blown out in a couple of occasions. So those are really the only teams, right? Because even teams that are 1-4, like the Bengals, I think people would still take a lot of their games and favor the Bengals over, maybe like the Ravens or the Steelers probably in some cases. Also against the Chiefs, right? Those are 2 teams that we talked about the Chiefs being undefeated, but the Bengals were right there, nearly beating them. Also the Ravens, if they don't mess up that snap, they probably beat the Ravens too. And the Bengals could have a lot better record for themselves, but again, looking at their defense, it's something that holds them back, and it's making a big difference, obviously, because they're 1-4. The Rams, very talented, but they're very injured, so they're being held back by that. And even teams that are 2-3 right now, are you going to tell me that the 49ers are the same as the New York Giants right now? The 49ers have lost to the Cardinals this past week, and the Cardinals have also destroyed the Los Angeles Rams. The Rams are 1-4, but they beat the San Francisco 49ers that are 2-3. And even if you look at the teams we just talked about, the Bengals, the Ravens, and the Commanders as an example, you look at the Commanders destroying the Bengals, right, in that one game. Then this past week, you have the Bengals almost beating the Ravens. And now this week, let's say the Ravens destroy the Commanders. So that's 3 teams there that have all kind of played each other and have had different results against one another. And I think now finally getting to the why this is and why there's so much disparity, I think, which is great. I love it because it makes it a lot more interesting on Sundays when you know, like, the Chiefs are not going to win every week. I know they have, but it feels closer than I think in years past, right? With not having that outright team that you can point to be the best in the NFL. Why that is, I feel like it's a lot more about, nowadays, it's a lot more about executing, and it's more about scheme, and it's more about being consistent throughout an entire game than it's just about, just having the best team, the biggest names on your roster, right? I think it's a matter of fact that I think all teams now are trying to copy off of each other, and all the best teams, we just keep talking about how this Kyle Shanahan type of offense, right? The zone runs type of offense, right? And then incorporating play action off of it, and the motion, the deception, and things like that. All of that, I feel like everyone's doing that, or at least all the good teams are. And to me, just looking at that as just what it is, right, as a general fact, it's harder, right, obviously, to beat teams that are doing the same thing you are and are essentially copying off of or reading off of the same blueprint as you are. So it's harder to outright beat them when they know what you're trying to do, when you know what they're trying to do, and you're all trying to find the pieces to fit the exact same scheme and game plan and things like that. It's going to lead to closer games. It's going to lead to, like we talked about weeks ago now, how the passing numbers are down, how the running numbers are up, and it's not just about having talented rosters like the 49ers do, right? They're 2-3. Like the Ravens do, they're 3-2, but they lost to the Raiders and things like that. They could have lost other games as well. It's not just about that. I feel like it's more about now really trying to perfect the game plan. And I think right now why it's so competitive and why it looks so close right now is because we're in a period where everyone's still trying to figure out how to get the best out of that system to kind of fit the players that they have right now. And we're seeing how some games they don't look that great, while other games they get an impressive win. And it's very up and down. You can't really pick a team that's so dominant, like I said, because they play great this one week and then they might lose to a team that's like 1-4, 2-3, or something like that, right? And it kind of relates to the NBA in a sense, right? Because I think the NBA now, it's a lot more spread out, it's a lot more competitive now, and I think the NFL is kind of trending towards that a little bit more. And just lastly here, to mention this point I had on the offense and how everyone's trying to copy off of each other. You look at the teams that are kind of not doing the same thing, and the Jets are the biggest example of this, right? Everyone critiques Aaron Rodgers and how they're performing on offense because it's too old-fashioned, it's too ancient, there's not enough movement, everything is so standstill, especially with the pieces that they have. Everyone points to the Jets as this misaligned offensive team that's just not doing things right because they're not doing what everybody else is doing, right? And you're seeing it on the field, right? How the offense looks inefficient. There's miscommunications. It just doesn't look as nice, as effective as other teams like the Commanders, right? The Rams with their running game. The Ravens as well. This zone run, power heavy team that uses play action very well, motions like crazy. The Jets don't do that, and I guess it's no surprise now that their offense is suffering because of that. And elsewhere, we mentioned the Bengals as well as one team that was too boring. They were too much in shotgun. It was too vanilla. They did the exact same thing every time until they didn't. They had Joe Burrow more under center. They had more motion. They had more guys and pieces moving around. Then they almost beat the Chiefs as well. So they kind of got out of that a little bit, but I think the Jets is the best example of that and how teams now are evolving into this new scheme, this new game plan, and that's why I feel like it's not only harder to beat a team that's trying to do the exact same thing as you, but also trying to perfect it now. I won't say fully moving away from being pass heavy, but it feels like you're trying to emphasize the running game more, having a better defense, and sustaining longer drives. And we had that conversation weeks ago, but I think that conversation in the past kind of leads us to where we are now and how everything is so close. And it's definitely not like a rant or anything like that. I think this is great. I think this is great that anybody can beat anybody. And it just kind of popped into my head the last couple, or really after this week when I saw the games, and I'm thinking, how did the Giants beat the Seahawks? Or how did the Cardinals just beat the 49ers? I feel like last year and even years before that, it was a lot clearer who was going to win. But now it's a great thing, and hopefully this continues further along in more weeks. But speaking about continuing on, we have to continue on and talk about Davante Adams and where his situation stands now in terms of trades. How does it look to be traded to the New York Jets and also the New Orleans Saints after recent developments on both of those teams over the last few weeks? So we're going to get into that and talking about Davante Adams right after this break.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Jumping right back into the action now on the show, still one of the biggest topics we have to still try and update and talk about is this Davante Adams situation now, because I think it's taken a step forward, but maybe not for a couple teams, right? Because when we got the news last week that Davante Adams requested a trade, that he preferred to be traded away from the Las Vegas Raiders, right away it was Aaron Rodgers, right? That was the first team that popped into our head, the first player that popped into our head when we talked about Davante Adams now officially making it certain that he was probably going to get traded, and he's probably definitely not going to go back to the Raiders, right? So not only was it the Jets, but also the New Orleans Saints popped up, because not a lot of people know that their wide receivers coach is the personal wide receivers coach for Davante Adams, or they have a very close connection overall. So that's something that attracted him there, or also obviously Derek Carr, his former college teammate, and after, ironically, how things didn't work out in Las Vegas, that he kind of wants to give it a second shot. And the Saints, looking as good as they once did, it made it like a good option for Davante Adams, right? Two top destinations because of their relationships with Derek Carr and Aaron Rodgers mostly. But even with that, it's not just about those relationships. Based on the timeline of this trade, we looked at both of these teams as great options because of how well they were playing, how well they were put together, and just overall their offenses look like, we could have something here, right, with the Jets and how they rebooted on the offensive line, bringing in Mike Will, having Aaron Rodgers obviously healthy for a whole year, hopefully. We thought that this was their year. And even with the Saints as well, bringing in Clint Kubiak and how that changed everything for them. Alvin Kamara was looking amazing. The passing game as a whole, their offense as a whole, was looking unstoppable. So on paper, you look at that, their game planning was great. Rashid Shaheed was kind of developing into this nice piece for them. Chris Olave, another underrated receiver that would pair nicely with Davante Adams as well. The buildup of these teams was looking great as well. So that's why when the news was announced, we kind of came on here and we talked about the potential landing spots. But, I said that it was too obvious for him not to go to the Jets or to the Saints, obviously, for these reasons. But now, a week or a week and a half later, it's hard to say that it could have gone worse for both of these teams, right? For the Saints and for the Jets. Because looking at the situations that we have now, after the developments recently of both teams, now reports are saying that the trade talks between the Jets and the Saints have sort of slowed down a little bit, and now we're thinking how long could this take now? Maybe Davante is having second thoughts after seeing what has transpired in both of these organizations over the last week and a half or so, that maybe now it could open the door for other teams to get in there and really have a possibility to have Davante Adams on their team. And what I'm referring to, obviously looking at the Saints and the Jets and how things have drastically changed for both of them, right? Because starting off with the Saints, they started 2-0, and their offense was playing amazing, like I said, because of Clint Kubiak, and their offense was just maybe not the most eye-catching on paper, but the way that they were playing, right, putting up 40-something points in both of their first games, and their defense we already knew was solid. So that was great. That just jumped off the board as well. Derek Carr looked rejuvenated from, ironically, like I said, his time in Las Vegas when he played with Davante Adams, and Chris Olave was looking better. Raheem Shaheed, Alvin Kamara, their defense was solid, but now how drastically it's changed. Now they've lost 3 games in a row. They're third in the division. Derek Carr is out indefinitely with an oblique injury that he suffered against the Chiefs on Monday night, and their offensive line is very injured right now. So not only all of that is kind of working against them, but now they have to play Tampa Bay this upcoming Sunday, and then on a shorter week right after that, they have to face the Denver Broncos as well, who have surprised a lot of people with their recent performances, right? They beat the Jets obviously on the road. They just destroyed the Las Vegas Raiders. So who's to say, with the injuries and the fact that Derek Carr's not playing, who's to say that the Broncos couldn't be in a close game with the Saints and maybe end up beating them as well? So after those 2 games and already losing 3 in a row, you're looking at the Saints team. Are they going to try and trade for Davante Adams, or is Davante Adams going to want to go there with not knowing what's going on with Derek Carr, and also with potentially this team being like 2-5 or 3-4 potentially over the next couple weeks? So that's something else that kind of stands out, and maybe Davante Adams is having second thoughts. So that's one team, right? And then the Jets, almost as bad as the Saints. It's kind of hard to pick which one's worse, but not an ideal spot to be in nonetheless, right? Because they got all the attention, all the hype this year, initially because Aaron Rodgers was going to be healthy, and the fact that they revamped this offseason by fully investing in the idea that they were going to be all in, right? They went out and got offensive linemen, they got Mike Will, and they addressed some things through the draft as well. So it really looked like, all right, this Jets team is getting their stuff together. Aaron Rodgers is going to be healthy. They go out, get him more offensive linemen and whatnot, get him another weapon, and it looks like this year they're taking things seriously, right? With the names that they have on their team, adding on to Breece Hall and Braylon Allen, who looks great as well. Their defense is still top 10, probably, definitely. It started off rough, against the 49ers, so you kind of gave them a pass. They got better against the Tennessee Titans, but then afterwards, it looked like it finally came into fruition against the New England Patriots, where they destroyed them at home, and we felt like this was the point where Aaron Rodgers was only going to get better, the offense was only going to get better, and they were going to tread lightly after that game and, get better as the season went on. But after back-to-back losses to the Broncos and only putting up 9 points, you might be thinking, all right, that was bad. Aaron Rodgers didn't play great, but we did play in like hurricane conditions or something like that. It's not definitely awful at that point, but now after the recent loss to the Minnesota Vikings, definitely a contending team, an opportunity to kind of stick your foot in the ground and prove that last week was such an anomaly that we're going to go out to London and beat one of the undefeated teams in the NFL. But on the other side, they got destroyed, right? Aaron Rodgers throws 3 more interceptions, and while the game was close, I don't think that really had to do with the Jets being better as much as it did with the Vikings just not playing a great game. So that doesn't look great as well. Now the fact that they fired their head coach and it looks like you got internal problems with this organization, is that where Davante Adams wants to be? Can the New York Jets be a place that will look like the team that they have right now after 2024? Aaron Rodgers might not be the quarterback there. Do you want to play out the rest of your contract there, knowing that Aaron Rodgers could be gone? Are they going to blow up the rest of the team as well, with maybe Joe Douglas being gone after this year and bringing in a whole new regime if they don't accomplish what they set out to do at the beginning of this year? And right now, it doesn't look like they're built right now from an organization leadership standpoint to go out and get to a conference championship or anything like that. Is that where Davante Adams wants to go and try and win a Super Bowl? Because that's really, at least I think, what Davante Adams is playing for right now. What more is there to do for him? Because I still think he is pretty much considered the best receiver in the NFL, or definitely like top 3 or something like that. If I'm Davante Adams, I don't know if these two teams are my favorites to go play anymore. If the goal is to go win a Super Bowl, right? If your goal is to make it as likely as possible for you to go out and really compete for a Super Bowl, I don't know if these two teams fit the bill as of right now. Unless he just wants to go play with his buddies, if he wants to go and, play with his old college quarterback or play with the quarterback that he had most success for just a good time, then maybe consider these options. But I think the best chance to win, I think now you have to expand your horizons and think about those other options that before might not have looked so good. But now with the way the Saints are trending, the way the Jets are trending, why not give a look to the Steelers or something like that? They don't look very great right now, but you could make a case that it looks better than what the Jets are going through right now, or the Saints and how injured they are. The Commanders, they're trending. They're the highest climbers in all of this, right? And I know they're young, and I know they're planning not just for this year, but why not go out there and play out the rest of your contract there and help this organization grow into a serious contender over the next few years? And maybe, who knows, you get to a conference championship or you get to the divisional round. And why can't you go farther than that? Because Jayden Daniels certainly seems like a quarterback capable of winning a Super Bowl or something like that. Why is that such a bad option now, right? They're looking like one of the best teams, and they could certainly benefit from having someone next to Terry McLaurin. So I think now I'd say the Jets certainly need him the most because of all the pressure and expectations, but also just between the Saints and the Jets, I think he has a better chance of winning with the Jets too because of the injury to Derek Carr. We don't know how long he's going to be hurt. But if we're including all options here, I think these two teams have certainly taken a hit down the rankings, if you will, on which team Davante Adams should want to go for. And it's definitely not just all up to him. The Raiders are going to evaluate the trade options, but I don't think it'll make much of a difference if he goes to the Jets or the Saints. I don't think it'll change that much from a situation in the Raiders where they look all right, but they're not really contenders up until this point. So it should certainly change how confident people feel about him going to the Jets and the Saints based on how the Saints, you don't know what's going on with them health-wise. The Jets look like a mess, firing their head coach and things like that. Well, we'll see where he ends up, but I feel like it now has kind of made this thing go longer than it should have originally, where the report said that it could have been all figured out this week. I don't think that's going to be the case anymore. So we'll keep an eye on that. We'll keep talking about it, I'm sure, over the next few days. But we have one more topic to get to on today's show, recapping the Giants win over the Seahawks. I had to bring it up because it was so unlikely that we had to talk about it. The game itself was great, so we're going to go through everything, the performances, the recap, and just give my thoughts on it to end this show. So stick around for that. We'll be right back in just a few seconds. Thank you for joining me here on the last segment of today's show, kind of capping off all the recaps that we have been doing. I had to bring this one up because while maybe a lot of people didn't tune into this game originally just because you looked at the matchup and you're thinking the Jets, travel, or the Giants, traveling to the Seahawks, it's not going to be a great game. The afternoon window, I feel like a lot of times leaves a lot of people disappointed. The Giants traveling across the country basically to take on the division-leading Seahawks without Malik Nabers, without Devin Singletary. I feel like a lot of people kind of just wrote it off based on that fact, but Seattle was coming off of a loss and still impressed going toe-to-toe in that matchup against the Lions. But I think now, while this was also a loss, this one was definitely more alarming, I guess you would say, because losing to the Giants with all those circumstances, and the Giants, putting up their second highest point total of the season to go to 2-3 now, and the Seahawks losing back-to-back games to go to 3-2. The most unexpected result, as much as the Cardinals, beat the 49ers on the road as well, this one definitely takes the cake just because, the Giants, everything was so predetermined and revolved around their rookie wide receiver Malik Nabers, and the fact that you didn't have him, what was Daniel Jones going to look like, and were they going to be even more conservative now that Malik Nabers wasn't there, or without even Devin Singletary, what and who were you going to turn to in that running game to get better results if that even was possible? And they did exactly that, and they actually relied on these two guys that I have on the screen. Right, Tyrone Tracy Jr. and Darius Slayton. Darius Slayton definitely more well known, but I don't think a lot of people knew who Tyrone Tracy Jr. was at all. Still, maybe even some Giants fans didn't know who he was. But he had an amazing day. I tuned back into the game and looked at his stats, and I'm like, where did that come from? From the times I was watching, I feel like I didn't really see him break out too many big runs or anything like that. It might have just been me, but he had 18 carries for 129 yards, an amazing day for a running back. Darius Slayton led all wide receivers, 8 receptions for 122 yards and 1 touchdown. Wan'Dale Robinson also added another touchdown with 6 receptions as well. And Daniel Jones, for the idea that he could have been more conservative or that he was just going to get absolutely killed because he didn't have Malik Nabers, he finished 23 of 34 for 257 yards and 2 touchdowns on the day. Ironically, one of his better performances without 2 of his best players. So, how do you explain that, right? If you're a Seahawks fan or even a Giants fan, how do you explain Daniel Jones at all throughout his entire tenure in New York, honestly? But those two guys definitely stood out the most for the Giants. And then on the other side, Geno didn't have an awful day. He was 28 of 40, 284 yards, and a touchdown. He was sacked 7 times. So where the Lions really couldn't get to him, and I mentioned that as a problem for them a couple segments ago, the Giants, one of the things they do well is get to the quarterback with Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau and Dexter Lawrence. They sacked Geno Smith 7 times on Sunday. So obviously you can't work with that too much, getting hit like that repeatedly. And the rushing wasn't that great either. Geno Smith actually led all rushers with 72 yards on 4 carries. And Kenneth Walker didn't really do too much in this game. I'm pretty sure he only had like 30 or something yards, maybe even less than that. And Tyler Lockett also had 75 yards on the day, but they just missed out on the big moments. I felt like it felt like all the big moments, all the big potential swing points went to the Giants. And looking at this game and how it played out, it's ironic that I mentioned that because this game started off with a huge momentum swing, right? The Giants had the first drive of the game, or the Giants were in their first drive, and it was going great, to just start this game with a 16-play drive, and it looks like they're about to punch it in. Then they fumble the ball at the goal line, and the Seahawks run it all the way back, and the Giants are losing. When they were an inch away from taking the lead in the most Giants way possible, they fumble the ball, and now they're losing 7-0 after doing all that hard work. They just squander it away, and now if you really thought this game wasn't going to be close after seeing that, you probably turn the game off. But it only got better from there, because from that point on, the Giants kind of, didn't blink, and they were able to, after a few drives, get it back to 7-7, and then a field goal apiece had this game at 10-10 going into halftime. And then after that, really, in the second half, if people tune back into this game, the Giants defense really began to show up more in the second half, with forcing a fumble on DK Metcalf and scoring a touchdown to Darius Slayton right after that. And now they take the lead 17-10. And I didn't like the fourth down call by the Seahawks. I forget what drive it was. It might have been the one right after Darius Slayton scored, right? They're feeling a little bit more urgency to not let this game get away. They go for it on fourth down, and I didn't like the call, like I said. I think it was like 4th and 1 or something like that. It was 4th and short. And it kind of makes sense running a play action pass, but to fully turn your back on a defensive front where you could clearly see that they're going to send in a lot of people, right? Based on the lineup and everything like that, you clearly see everyone pushed up to the line of scrimmage, and you know that at least 2 guys or 3 guys are coming at you at once. To run a play action pass where you turn your back completely away from the oncoming rushers, and then Geno Smith turns around and he has a guy right in his face, and the play's pretty much dead at that point on. So I didn't love the call there. I would have preferred a much more simpler call, and just running it up the middle or something like that. But, that was a big moment that the Giants clearly won, on top of forcing a fumble right before that. And also, after that point, it was 17-10, and then afterwards it got to a score of 23-13. After the Giants kicked a couple more field goals, and the Seahawks also tacked one on with 6 minutes remaining in the fourth quarter. Before that, before the 6-minute mark, the Seahawks were trailing by 10 points, but then after that, the Seahawks scored right before the 2-minute warning, making it 23-20, and now we have a game. Now we're thinking, all right, the Seahawks losing the turnover battle, losing the sack battle, losing the big moments. This is their last gasp attempt to try and make a comeback now. Are the Giants going to hold, or, like I'm sure most of us thought, are they going to squander this like the most Giants way possible, right? But right after that, the Seahawks forced the punt, and they were going to be able to tie the game at 23 before, of course, the Giants jump over the line of scrimmage on that kick to tie the game. I think it was Isaiah Simmons that jumps over the line, blocks the punt, and Bryce Ford Wheaton returns it all the way back for a special teams touchdown that pretty much seals the game at 29-20 in favor of the Giants. And like most of the game was going, the big moments, the momentum swinging moments, other than the first one where the Seahawks returned it all the way back, the Giants won the majority of those plays in a big game where the Giants were missing a lot of players. They got contributions everywhere, right? From their defense stepping up with the 7 sacks, with forcing fumbles, with their special teams also stepping up and blocking that field goal, obviously, to not only preserve the 3-point lead, but to run it all the way back and close the game out. You obviously can't plan for anything like that to happen, but sometimes that's how it plays out, and these desperate teams pull out these miraculous performances from a Tyrone Tracy or a Darius Slayton that you never could have predicted. But a lot of times football comes to those situational moments, right? The crucial fourth down calls, the decision to go for it or not, how you stop a fourth down, the turnover battles is always a big one, how you end a half versus how you start a half as well. All those things matter so much in football that the Giants, I felt like, won the situational football battle in this game, and they ended up stealing one here over the Seattle Seahawks. And now, on offense, Darius Slayton played a tremendous game. Their running back, Tyrone Tracy, like I said, played great. And credit for them for not being too conservative also with Daniel Jones. You saw it with Darius Slayton. He caught a couple big passes down the field. That was encouraging to see. And now you kind of only hope that gets better going forward, right? The Giants are 2-3 and are showing a little bit of fight here. So considering how maybe the Eagles look, or the Cowboys even, the Giants could have beat the Cowboys, if you guys remember that. They could have beat them in that game. They probably should have beat them in that game. So the Giants could be like 3-3 right now, if you really think about it. And then we get into the hypotheticals too. They lose a game, not allowing a touchdown to the Commanders. So the Giants, like could have a winning record right now if you really think about it, if it wasn't for some of the mistakes they made. But regardless of that, they showed some of their fight, some of their talent on display, and it was a surprise nonetheless from the Giants' standpoint, but also the Seahawks, right? Dropping a game like this, even with guys like Leonard Williams back, Jerome Baker back, it was still a concern to me to see the Seahawks play pretty bad on defense as well. And the Giants did just make plays, but it is something that we should pay attention to a little bit more, I would say, with the Seahawks team. But it was a good one for the Giants. The Seahawks will try to get better off of this game tomorrow when they play the San Francisco 49ers, an even bigger game than we just had over this past weekend. So we'll be tuning into that. But for right now, that's going to wrap it up for today's show. Thank you guys for joining me. Please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the show, as well as following the network on all forms of social media. Make sure to check out the GSMC Podcast Network channel and the GSMC Sports Network channel on YouTube for more coverage around the NFL and more content around the Chip Shot Football Podcast for you guys to check out. And also, tune in every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time for more of these live shows where we cover more NFL, more storylines, more debate topics, and all those sort of things around this league. I've been your host, Maye. Join me back here again tomorrow, same time, where we start talking about Week 6 in the NFL.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna